Today. My son is home, where I'm home with my son with a fever. I don't have a fever, he has a fever, but you get the point. So I want you guys, you should have been given this packet from the guest teacher today, and I want you to follow along and fill this in. You're going to need a red color pencil and a ruler for today's lesson. Okay, so go ahead and pause this video if you don't already have those supplies. Make sure you have them, and we'll get started. Okay, so we're kind of shifting gears from data analysis to scatter plots, trend lines, and linear regression. So today we're going to do linear regression without a graphing calculator. When I get back tomorrow, we'll practice using a graphing calculator, but today, no graphing calculator. You need to know how to do this without the calculator. So what we have here is number of people, those are our Y values, who volunteered at animal shelter on each day. So they kept track first, second, third, fourth, and so on days, and how many people came to volunteer. Just random days, random number of volunteers. Okay, so our job is going to be to graph this information. We're going to make a scatter plot. We're going to use that scatter plot to create a line based on the scatter plot, and then we're going to find the slope and y-intercept to determine what the linear equation would be to represent the data so we can make predictions. I know it sounds like a lot, but we're going to go step by step. So step one of this process is to label the X and Y axis. And some of you might be thinking, how do I know what to label those? Well, X is day, right? So our X axis is going to be day number. And then we can just go by ones because that can fit all the way across here. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and so on. And then our y-axis is going to be number of people, okay? And it goes all the way up to 19. So let's see if we have 19 here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16. So we don't have enough to go by single digits. So we're going to have to go by twos to fit it all in. So you should get all the way up to 32. So that's step one, just labeling, right? Nice and neat. We know the day number and the number of people that visited this animal shelter. Step two is to scatter the plots, right? So each of these is an ordered pair. Okay, so I have ordered pair 1, 9, I have ordered pair 2, 5, ordered pair 3, 13. So I'm just going to go ahead and put those where they need to go. Obviously, I'm going to have to estimate where the 9 would be here. So I have 1, 9, 2, 5, 3, 13, 4, 11, 5, 10, 6, 11. Day 7 had 19 visitors, helpers, and day 8 had 12. Okay, so we can kind of see a trend happening here, hence trend lines. So we scattered our plots, and now we're going to create a trend line to represent. Okay, so step 3, create a trend line. Which is also known as, aka, line of best fit. Okay, so you might hear someone say, what's the trend line? What's the line of best fit? They're talking about the same thing. So here's what we're going to do to create this trend line. You're going to take your ruler and you're going to try to make a line that is as close to as many points as possible, right? So I don't want to make my line up here because then that wouldn't be close to the points down there. So you want to try to angle it as best you can to get as close to as many points as possible. What you're going to notice here is that I have a couple outliers, right? I have a couple points that don't really fit the rest of the trend. So I'm not really going to pay attention to those, which is going to help us make our trend more accurate to all of the different points we have, right? So I'm not going to go like this and try to include this 19 point. And I'm not going to go like this and try to include this 5 point. I'm going to try to make my trend line as close to as many of the points as possible, right? So I'm going to go kind of right in between here. Let's see here. Many points as possible. Yeah, this will work. So I'm going to draw my trend line. Beautiful. So this line is close to these points up here, close to these points down here. Okay, our goal is to just be as close to as many as possible, right? Your trend line might not look exactly like mine. So the most difficult part for algebra students to understand with this concept is like, as long as your data makes sense with your trend line, you're going to be okay. Yours does not have to match mine perfectly. And you'll get better at this the more we do it. Okay, so we labeled our axes, we scattered our plots, we drew our trend line. Okay, step 4 is to locate 2 perfect intersection points. On the trend line. So this is where we are going to ignore our plots that we scattered. We're going to specifically look at our trend line. Right? I'm going to zoom in here. We're going to specifically look at just this line that I made. And I'm going to look for 2 perfect intersection points. So for example, this right here is a perfect intersection point because this point goes through 3 and 10 perfectly. It's not a point I already had. It's a new point that I'm creating. And then I'm going to look and see if I can find any others. This one looks pretty good. This would also be a perfect intersection point. Now, my perfect intersection points might not be the same as your perfect intersection points, and that's okay. All right, it's very common for us to have different points. As long as yours are perfect on your graph, that's what I'll be looking for when it comes time for a quiz. So that was step 4, 2 perfect intersection points. Step 5 is to find the slope. Of the trend line using those 2 red points we created. Right? So again, we are ignoring every other point. Now we're just focused in on these red ones. Okay? So my slope, remember, is rise or fall over run. So this one happens to go up, right? And how many is it going up? This is where you need to pay close attention to your increments. It's not just going up 1, it's going up 2 people. So it's going to be 2 as my numerator for my slope. And then 1, 2, 3, because each of my x-axis values are only worth 1 day. So this is where you really need to pay close attention to those increments. So my slope is going to be 2/3. Okay, it's a positive trend line, so I have a positive slope. Step 6 is to identify the y-intercept. Right? And we know what that is. The y-intercept is where this trend line crosses the y-axis. So my y-intercept is going to be 0, 8. Yours might be different. Okay, and that's okay as long as you identify it correctly and it matches. And then our last step, step 7, is to create a linear equation based on the trend line. So that linear equation is going to follow y equals mx plus b. So we have our m, 2/3 x, and we have our b. plus 8. So what we just did is we took a table of information, we created a scatter plot, used the scatter plot to make a trend line, used the trend line to find the slope and y-intercept, and then we created an equation based on the information. And we'll talk about what we will use this for when I get back. But right now I just need you to get from step 1 to step 7. Okay, so let's turn the page and we'll do another one together. All right. So this used to be one of my favorites because I had a super old car, but now I have a new car, so I can't really like make fun of my old car as much, because when we would do this, we would determine that my old car was worth nothing because it was so old. I mean, it was nice, but it was old. So this isn't as relevant to me anymore. Anyway, we have a table. Mileage, price. So how many miles do you have on your car? How many miles have you driven in thousands, right? So 22,000, 14,000, 18,000. And the value of the car, okay? So like my car had 170,000 miles on it, right? The price, almost nothing, but we're not gonna document that. So we're gonna do the exact same steps we did last time, okay? But we're not gonna write out the steps again, we're just going to do them. So if you remember, step 1 was to label the axis, right? So mileage is my x-axis. So I'm going to come down here and write mileage. And I need to make sure to put in thousands, right? So everybody knows that these actually count for thousands of miles. And I need to get it up to 30. My highest number is 30. I certainly can't go by single digits here. So I'm going to come down here and I'm going to go by 3s. So this first one's going to be 3. I'm going to skip 6 because then it gets too cluttered, and then I have 9, 12, 15, 18, 21, 24, 27, 30, 33. So I have everything here by 3s. I just only showed every other one because it just gets too crowded. And then my y-axis is going to be the price. Again, thousands of dollars. Okay, and I need to go all the way up to 18. And I think we discovered we don't have enough space to go up by singles, so we're going to go up by 2,000s again, or by 2s, and these would be thousands. Oops, I almost skipped 28. Okay, so step 1 is done. I labeled the axes. Step 2 was to scatter the plots. So remember, these are my ordered pairs, right? So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to plot ordered pair 22, 16, and so on. So if I go over to about where 22,000 miles would be, and then go up here to like 16, and I put a point, right? So I'm estimating 14,000 miles, and I'm going to go up to 17,000. 18,000 miles, and I'm also going to go up to 17,000. 30,000 miles, and I'm going to go up to 14,000. 8,000 miles, and it's worth 18,000. 24,000 miles, and it's worth 15,000. So I scattered my plots. I'm good to go. Now I'm going to find graph my trend line. So again, I'm trying to make a line that's as close to as many points as possible. I don't have an outlier here, so that makes it pretty easy. So I'm going to go ahead and come up with my trend line as close to as many points as possible. I'm going to draw that trend line. Okay, so it's above here, below here, below, right? So it's equally distributed amongst all the points. Okay, now step 3, if you recall, wait, hold on. 1, 2, 3. Step 4 is to locate the 2 perfect intersection points. So I'm going to look here and I'm going to say, well, this is pretty perfect. Remember, it's of the trend line, not of the scatter plots. And then this one looks like a pretty perfect intersection point too. Okay, so I'm ignoring the scatter plots now. I'm just looking at the trend line. And now I need to find my slope, right? So I've got my 2 points I'm going to focus on, and I'm going to find my slope is going to be worth what? So I'm going to go, down 2, right? Because this is worth $2,000. And then I'm going to go 2, 4, 6. Oh, I didn't even do that right. Hold on. 3, 6, 9. These are each worth 3, right? So it's going to be 2 and 9. Okay, so my slope is -2 because I fell 2. And then I went forward 9. 3, 6, 9. Because these are in increments of 3,000 miles. My y-intercept is, I'm just going to say 0, 20, because it's, I mean, that's really much where the point goes, right? So 0, 20. And so then my equation is going to be y equals -2/9, x plus 20, right? So let's take this a step further now. What does the slope mean? Okay, so we have -2. Those are my y values, right? Because it's change in y. And what is y? That's the price in thousands. So we've got price in thousands over mileage. So we have -2,000 for every 9,000 extra miles, right? So if I'm not sure what the slope means, right, in the context of this scenario, I can just look at the title of my x and y axis, right? So that means that for every, or the car value decreases $2,000 for every extra 9,000 miles, right? And we know it's decreasing. And maybe you guys already know that about cars, that the more you drive them, the more the value is less, okay? But this is a good way to look at it and see where a trend would go, okay? So for those of you that think you're going to be in finance someday, this is kind of what they do. Now, they don't get out their rulers and their red pencils. They use calculators and complex problems, complex technology programs to help them with these predictions. But this is what finance people do. They make predictions based on trends, okay? And then let's talk about, what does the y-intercept mean? Well, my y-intercept is 0, 20, right? So what this tells me is that at 0 miles, right? So 0, 20. So 0 is the miles, 20 is the price, right? Because this is my x and my y. So at 0 miles, the car is worth $20,000, right? So as long as you can kind of wrap your head around the fact that x values are always going to have to do with the mileage, and y values have to do with the price, right? These x's and y's, they are named x and y because algebra has a lot to do with graphing, and you have your x-axis and your y-axis. Nobody tells you that, right? As you're learning x and y's in ordered pairs, you just think it's fun and cute, but it all comes back to the graph. Okay, so that's your notes for today. Thank you for following along. I hope it didn't take you much more than the time hopefully you got done and have a little time left to, I don't know, work on other assignments or something. But I'll see you guys tomorrow. Bye.